Hey traders, Raghee here, and we're still persisting with our long bias. And one of the things that I'm getting a lot of questions about is, okay, Rag, when you're day trading, you're only looking for long positions, and that's absolutely true. Why? We are in an asset bubble. We have uptrends, as you can see here. This is the S&P in a double green uptrend. This is the NASDAQ in a double green uptrend. This is the Dow in a double green uptrend. You also have some of the heavily weighted sectors that are being impacted by the broader averages being higher. Here you have discretionary, communications. Here we have the utilities, the staples, a little shaky, but still you can see they bounced higher. Let's take a look at the XLK. Clearly that's going to be heading higher. Here is the XLI. A little shaky, but double green. So it's just easier to be on a higher probability of follow through by looking at only long entries. Now, we can't be indiscriminate about it. So let's talk about an example from today. We can't be indiscriminate about it. In fact, we take a look at the NASDAQ futures, which, by the way, why do I bring up the NASDAQ futures? The NASDAQ futures are very important to me because if the NASDAQ futures do not have clarity, I will most of the time, now there are some exceptions, we'll talk about that in the premium video, but most of the time, if the NASDAQ is not moving higher, I don't have clarity to justify trading the S&P either. Most people don't do that, but let me tell you why we do that. If you take a look at the weighting of the NASDAQ, take a look at the top four names, take a look at the top four names in the S&P, look at their relative weighting. Tech is, by a landslide, the most important sector within the S&P. So it will usually move like the NASDAQ. And when it doesn't, there's a few other sectors, too, specifically, that we look for to see why it may not and why it may be able to persist without tech moving. So again, most of the time, where the NAS goes, the S&P goes. So we had a breach. Here's your retreat. And it's really just looking for the lows from which we can control risk and get long from. That's really it. I don't recommend the momentum buys. I'd rather retracement buys, even retests of significant lows like my HPMR or my V-score, things like that. But I'd rather focus on the market retracing, and into that retracement we'll take advantage of an intraday buy the dip opportunity. And not enough people talk about intraday buy the dip opportunities. We talk about an end of day. We talk about the buy the dip on longer term time frames, something that we did last Monday, took profit on Friday, something that I'm looking at doing again by the end of the month. But you can buy the dip intraday with a window that's basically 9:30 to 4. So today I actually did grab a few options into the close, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I did that mostly on the NQ and ES with anticipation that we could see continued follow through. But I'll trade specifically if I'm trading the last hour of the day. Yes, sometimes I'll play the underlying futures contracts, but if I think there might be a move that could take us through the Asian session, what I want to do is look at the futures options. In this case, the ES off the VWAP and the NQ as well that I was looking at for a long position that I want to be in through the Asian, through the European and the UK Open. So we'll talk more about that. Think about sometimes the latter half of the day giving yourself the flexibility of an option on the futures contract versus the underlying, especially, think about this, especially if you were using day trading margin where you just have to get off that ride at 4:15 because now your margin requirement is going to go to the full amount. What if you did not want to get off that ride and yet you still want to use a very small amount of capital and limit your risk? The option on the futures contract, not the option on the ETF. The option on the futures contract is going to be something that you could take a look at. By the way, they do have weekly expiring options. The liquidity on those Monday, Wednesday expires aren't great, but it is something that we'll be talking about here in the coming days and weeks. All right, that's it for now. I'll see you in the next update.